Namaste, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I thank the organizers today of the COHNA Youth Action Network for enabling my participation at this conference based on such an important theme. Namaste. So for my presentation, I thought of keeping it focused on how scholarship from the home team, as we call ourselves at Infinity Foundation, has played a vital role in challenging deeply entrenched Hinduphobia. And to make my case, I will be using artifacts from my own work at IF. The next slide, please. To introduce myself, I am Manognya Sastry. I am presently the team leader of research at Infinity Foundation. I come from a background in actually science. I'm an astrophysicist by training. I have a master's in the subject from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. And I actually began my journey with Infinity Foundation in 2018, initially as a Swadeshi Indology scholar. Now, the Swadeshi Indology conferences, they have been held from IF to counter nearly the 3 centuries old narrative that we have of Western Indology regarding Bharata and Hinduism. So as a part of my association with IF, I have presented papers at these SI conferences right from the first series in 2018 on themes including Sheldon Pollock's Death of Sanskrit, Chronology, decentralization, and of course the Aryan Dravidian theory. The next slide, please. As I think most of us who have gathered in this room today are aware of, what a prominent role Rajiv ji has played for his pioneering work in engaging and countering the various challenges we face in the intellectual Kurukshetra. He has not only continuously recognized the morphology, right, of the Indological discourse over the past 3 decades, but he has created new impactful frameworks each time for engagement. And he has, of course, as Divya also pointed out, he has mentored many of us so that our work can be used effectively in responding to the existing challenges. Next slide, please. I think the first step towards being an intellectual Kshatriya is to first understand in depth the Kurukshetra we find around ourselves. This, I think, involves a lot of swadhyaya, and I'm speaking from my experience and my perspective, including reading and studying across the board, right? Now, the historical forces and players that have shaped our narratives and perceptions over centuries, and understanding the morphology of the Indological discourse and the attitudes towards Hinduism over the past few decades. All of this involves understanding the various states, right? Whether it is what is at stake for us over here, whether it is Hinduphobia or the loss of I would say assets, including intellectual property, and the ability to generate more knowledge with each passing decade and century. So all of these are invaluable learnings for one to understand, to be able to even formulate a drishti, right? And then to articulate the various components of that drishti. The next slide, please. So now, based on Rajivji's guidance and mentorship, which has included the creation of frameworks and terminologies and theories to formulate a Swadeshi drishti, right, at Infinity Foundation India, we have been working on major themes of research as intellectual Kshatriyas, including the Aryan Dravidian issues, Western universalism, and its role in Western Indology. We have focused on the study of inculturation, digestion, Newton theories, of course, chronology, desacralization, and even formulating a Swadeshi view of game-changing technologies such as AI. The next slide, please. I think from now, I would like to walk one through some of the impact, the IK journeys have had. And I'll be taking my own as, artifacts from my own research. Now, in the first two Swadeshi Indology conferences, for instance, the themes that we had, they centered around doing a complete Purvapaksha of Sheldon Pollock's work, and of course, the response we had from Rajivji's own book, The Battle for Sanskrit. Now, Sheldon Pollock was the main focus because he is the main proponent of the Neo-Orientalist school of Indology. Now, this is the most important left-wing post-Marxist, postmodernist school that we have today, that influences almost all the discourse in about India on most, I would say, media channels, whether it is print or cinema, internet, anything, right? And this school has influence both within India and around the world. Now, the immense body of work of this school, as let's say represented by its main proponent, Professor Sheldon Pollock, and the large number of the international and Indian scholars who base their work on Professor Pollock's work, had not been systematically studied or critically analyzed until this conference came on scene. And that was a pioneering role of the SI conference series in 2018. Now, for the first conference, of course, 4 themes were chosen. These included Pollock's work on Shastras, his paper on, Sanskrit influencing even Nazi ideology. Then we had the Pollock's papers on death of Sanskrit, and of course, the 4th, Pollock's thesis on Ramayana as a political device and being an example of the atrocity literature, right? So we chose Pollock because he represents most of these themes which the Neo-Orientalist school works on. And in the first conference, my own paper focused on the 3rd topic, which was the death of Sanskrit. Now, Pollock's main thesis on this was that, right from Vedic times, Sanskrit grammar and its literature has been a serious tool of political and social oppression, right? Because he says Sanskrit was monopolized by Brahmins and Sanskrit was used by Hindu kings who were responsible for violence and so on. So what my paper did was analyze this particular theme, identify inconsistencies, the cherry picking of historical data, blind spots in Professor Pollock's work, and as a part of the Purvapaksha and as a part of the Uttarapaksha, bid us to maybe a more dynamic and contemporary re-examination and self-defense of Sanskritam as our invaluable literary instrument even today. The next slide, please. In the second SI conference, I, along with my co-author Meg Kalyanasundaram, we worked on 2 important themes. One was chronology and the second was decentralization. Now, understanding chronology is especially important for every intellectual Kshatriya, because scholars like Professor Pollock, for instance, they place chronology at the heart of the comparative historical practice, right? Without chronology, establishing cause and effect can become difficult, if not at all possible, right? At the same time, altered chronologies can allow even for the possibility of proposing new hypotheses, which could constitute serious issues, whether it is appropriations or even reattributions or distortions or even leading to inventions of new etic histories, all of which are extremely problematic for civilizations like us. So my paper in this conference examined all these consequences. The next slide, please. The second theme that we addressed was the desacralization of Sanskritam. Now, among the primary themes the Neo-Orientalist school explores is the relationship between culture and power in pre-modern India. And they believe this relationship to be the linchpin to build many of the other startling theories we see later on. So in our paper, what we did was we carefully examined Pollock's work and studied his mechanism to secularize and globalize Sanskrit, right? And we also brought under scrutiny his role as a Sanskritist in doing so. Now, the Neo-Orientalist school wants to see the Indian history cleansed of any overtly native connections with India's past. And many scholars, including Pollock, have called for a revised writing, right? Where the Western scholars hold the adhikara and they decide what elements are worthy of, being added into the narrative and make the final cut. While we be the recipients of this entire narrative and we receive it secondhand in Bharata. So what our paper did was, it examined critically all his argumentation, his dismissal of even civilizationism, indigenism as valid applicable theories, and we examined the weaknesses in his arguments. The next slide, please. Now, this Aryan invasion and migration theory, as most of you in the room here have must be aware, it has been a burden thrust on Bharata with far-reaching consequences even to this day, including leading to secessionist, ideologies which operate in the country even today. Now, fundamentally, the ideas of the Aryan invasion or migration theory lead to narratives which state, firstly, that the ancestors of Bharata were invaders or those who migrated from outside. And what this does is they create an involute basis for later invaders being a part of the Bharatiya identity. Secondly, they relegate Sanskrit and Rigveda as not purely Bharatiya intellectual property and inheritance. And thirdly, these theories implicate that Sanskrit sources and commentaries and historical records of the land that have existed since millennia, these had pushed into a secondary status and almost, into oblivion and made inconsequential, while primacy is accorded to Greek and other Western sources without even subjecting them to any serious scrutiny. So, on this topic, what my first paper did, again, along with my co author, Meg, we focused on looking at the Aryan issue from the Bharatiya perspective, right? So, our focus was let us use Bharatiya sources to look at this problem instead of all the time being on the defensive and studying, what the Westerners have to say about this. So, what we did was we undertook a systematic study of some of the earliest Sanskrit texts. These include Rigveda, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Brahmapurana, Skanda Purana, Natya Shastra, Kumara Sambhavam, Raghuvamsham, so across various categories of Sanskrit literature. And we examined these texts for simple two words, Arya and Dravida, right? So we did an extensive analysis. It's like a pick and search analysis for these two words. Then what we did, we compiled all of them across the literature and to examine in what context and in what is the meaning these terms even have in our literature, let alone what anybody outside has to say on this. So we presented a depth view of these two terms, and it was not at all surprising to us, but it was in complete contrast to the kind of distortions that these terms had been subjected to, right? We used this entire compilation then to answer questions such as what is the range of meanings which emerge from the usage of Arya and Dravida in Sanskritam literature? Is there any evidence at all for an invasion of Dravida by Arya? Thirdly, is there any evidence at all for a migration of Aryas from outside India into India? Fourthly, is there any evidence of any Aryas migrating into India? And fifthly, is there any evidence to directly link Dravida with Dasyu, another term which has been misused? So now our mammoth paper studied all these questions and tried to answer them from our compilation. And the results, I think, are something that I would urge everybody to go and read. Along with this, so this was the Uttarapaksha in some sense. For the Purvapaksha, what we did is we subjected the entire Indo-European linguistics to serious scrutiny. Because what has happened is Indo-European linguistics as a domain has been accorded primacy over all other even disciplines in trying to answer this, Aryan Dravidian issue. So we undertook a Purvapaksha of that entire situation. The next slide, please. Now, this is something which is important, I think. The Aryan issue, the reason why we picked that is it is so deeply entrenched, not only in academia, but so many core aspects of the Bharatiya and the Hindu identity, right? That even the National Portal of India, which is one of the first websites, anybody who wants to understand India, any foreigner, you just go to Google, one of the first government, front pages which opens up is the National Portal of India. Even they carried such statements that the Aryans came from Central Europe and they settled in India. Can you imagine? This is a government website that the Vedic civilization, the decay of the Vedic civilization is ascribed to the invasion of Aryans. So we were very taken aback to see even how our own self-perception is impacted by this particular theory. The next slide, please. So what we did This was until 2017. Based on a paper of the SI2, from 2017 June, 6 months prior to that, my co-author Maid and we took up nearly a 6-month-long engagement with the PMO, ICHR, the National Informatics Center, challenging these statements through the mechanisms of RTI and public grievances. All we did was use these two mechanisms to ask them, can you please tell us what is the source for these particular statements that you have put on the website? We just asked them for the source. We didn't suggest any alternatives. We didn't suggest anything. We wanted to know what is the source for these statements. And we are happy to report that after a 6-month engagement, all of these statements were taken down simply because they were unable to even point out what was their authentic source for these kind of statements. So now, the last I checked, since 2017, these statements are no longer appearing on the National Portal of India website. The next slide, please. Further, as a part of the SI conferences, the entire series, in the 6th edition of that, again, we focused on the Aryan issue, and we highlighted what was truly at stake over here, because this is something which is very important for us to understand. Until, I would say, even the 18th century, there had been no dispute to the fact that the Vedas and the Sanskritam as a language belong to the land of Bharata and her civilization and constitute an inseparable part of her identity. There was no question at all as to whether these central, key assets belong to India or not. But since then, right, the Indological discourse, the way it has morphed, tables have turned, and now we have the onus to prove that yes, these are a part of India. And that is why, whether it is posited as an invasion or a migration, it is very important to understand and constantly challenge this particular issue. And we highlighted that what is at stake here is our assets, the indigeneity of our assets, and countering the false narratives which are aimed at our very identity. It is also important to show that it is this particular theory which, ends up creating a sort of a forced parity between the so-called migrating Aryans and the subsequent invaders of India, including both the Islamic and the British colonizations that we've had. The next slide, please. Apart from these words, these kind of papers and presentations that we've had in the Swadeshi Indology conferences, I've also been a part of the 10 Heads of Ravana, which, Divya spoke of earlier. It's very important. And as she mentioned, my essay in particular dealt with Michael Whitson. Now, Michael Whitson, again, has been championing the Aryan invasion, migration into India theories. He has been disregarding evidence, denigrating through ad hominem attacks, words which have gone back and challenged his thesis. So what my article in the book has done is shown the poor scholarship his work is riddled with. I show how, the role that he has played along with other Marxist historians in trying to, present an accurate and historically accurate narrative for Bharata by Bharatiyas that has been challenged. I also point out, some of the role that he has had in trying to thwart the attempts which were made by Hindus in North America to correct the history textbooks of, I think, the grade 6th, which was taught in the California public schools. Witzel's writings in trying to, show himself as a scholar, he was playing a central role in trying to thwart the entire attempt in correcting the textbooks, and I discuss that as well in the article. My second article also in the book, in the 10 Heads of Ravana, also studies Irfan Habib. Irfan Habib, as we all know, is a Marxist scholar from the Aligarh Muslim University. He has the distinction of being amongst the most vocal and unrelenting voices opposing the archaeological results of the excavations at Ayodhya. And I analyze his notorious role as an expert and a witness in the Ram Janmabhoomi issue, as well as his hold over the country's premier historical research institutes and universities. I trace his significant contributions to disfiguring and creating hegemony on academic institutions in perpetuating, false historical accounts. There is a third essay in the book, which I have authored along with my colleague Shubhadeep Mukhopadhyay, who will be speaking today, where we study Audrey Trishke's work. And now Trishke's positions on Hinduism and Hindutva, her whitewashing of temple destructions, her blatant misrepresentations of incidents from the Ramayana, all of these are subject to a careful scrutiny in our work. The next slide, please. In 2013, we also released another book called The Power of Future Machines from IFI, which is a collection of essays by experts exploring the future impact of artificial intelligence in various fields of human endeavor. What we do in this book is we build upon the framework and the analysis that was provided in Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, the 5 Battlegrounds book of Rajiv Ji. And we have experts from various fields, including geopolitics, strategic affairs, policy, and others engage and try and understand, potential impact of AI for India. The next slide, please. This is our upcoming work. I'm happy to announce that this year, as an author, along with Rajiv Ji and Kundan Singh, we have published a new game-changing book called The Battle for Consciousness Theory. It is literally, hot off the press, and we had the physical copies just released last week, and we are looking forward to some events in August to release this book. So what we do is in this book we investigate each of the phase of the American theoretician Ken Wilber's work and map it against the original integral theory of Sri Aurobindo. In part 1 of the book, we study how the Aurobindonian community responded to the Wilberization of their guru's work, and in part 2, we meticulously study Wilber's work itself and unpack each phase. Next slide, please. Just like how Pollock was the key proponent of the Neo-Orientalist school, and as even Divya mentioned previously, tackling the work of the most important proponent of a school helps us in a trickle-down effect in tackling with all the other scholars' work which mushrooms around it. Similarly, I think for the consciousness studies movement, Ken Wilber is the leading proponent, and he in fact he has been called as the Einstein of consciousness studies. He's been a prolific writer from the 1970s, but what he has actually done is he has appropriated Sri Aurobindo's core ideas and projected it as his own, and as somebody who has even superseded the guru. So what we do in this book is we study the misappropriation of Sri Aurobindo's work, which has taken place despite an active Aurobindonian community, and we study how this impacts not only the Aurobindonian movement but also the larger corpus of Indian thought, as well as the trajectory of consciousness studies and evolution. Our aim as authors in this book is to restore Sri Aurobindo's work to its rightful place and maybe lead even to a resurgence in the Sri Aurobindo school of thought within India. Next slide, please. So I hope through this presentation, the contours of possibilities of research as an intellectual Kshatriya at Infinity Foundation have perhaps been made clearer as to what is it that we do. And I thank the organizers once again for giving me an opportunity to share just a few glimpses and elements, from my own experience.
Thank you so much, Manognya. I think we're going to move on to.
Thank you.